Put simply, David Lammy is an idiot who shouldn't be anywhere near government, not just because he still talks and behaves like some wet behind-the-ears politics student, but because he's dangerous. I wondered how long it would be before our hopeless foreign secretary caused an international incident, and by God he's beaten all expectations by doing it in just 7 weeks. Less than 2 months in government and already he's managed to alienate and anger 2 of our staunchest allies, America and Israel. Which is record-breaking, even for a half-wit like him. Because in banning the sale of some arms to Israel he's taken a side in the Israel-Gaza conflict, and he's done it for all the world to see. He's also limited Israel, the only liberal democracy in the Middle East, from defending itself against a terrorist group whose sole aim is to erase Jews from the face of the earth. But the real horror here, and proof that not only does Lammy not have a heart or a scintilla of political nous, is that he announced this arms curb on the day 4 of the Israeli hostages Hamas slaughtered were being buried. The Israeli Defense Force had been on the brink of rescuing these poor, beleaguered souls, but somehow Hamas got word of it and slaughtered them all in the most horrific way. All were shot in the head, the guts, and the chest. And you'd have thought that as one of Israel's closest allies the British government might have had some compassion, some sympathy for these poor people who've had God knows what done to them by Hamas butchers since they were captured on October 7. But no, the cretinous Lammy stood up in the House of Commons on the day those people were being buried and announced an embargo on the sale of certain arms to Israel. How grotesque, how cruel! What message does that send to Israel? I'll tell you, it says that the British government has definitely and decisively taken the side of murdering terrorists Hamas over its ally Israel. But more worrying is that Lammy has made clear to Hamas that Israel can no longer rely on Britain, which will stiffen its murderous resolve and make them even more savage and barbaric than they already are. As Netanyahu said this week, instead of standing with Israel, a fellow democracy defending itself against barbarism, Britain's misguided decision will only embolden Hamas. Does Lammy not understand our relationship with Israel is hugely advantageous because our intelligence services work closely with Israel's famed Mossad in the fight against Islamic terror? The special relationship helps prevent terror here in Britain, yet Lammy has ceremoniously peed all over that. How keen will Israel be to work with us now in preventing Islamic terror after this betrayal? Labour is infamous for the anti-Semitism that in previous years has poisoned its ranks. Starmer assured us he had stamped it all out. Clearly not, because it's now looking like the left still hates Israel and by definition Jews. Of course Labour knows hating Israel and Jews is good for votes, because a pre-election poll said 44% of British Muslims believed the Israel-Palestine conflict was one of the top 5 most important issues in the run-up to the vote. And those Muslims needed assurance from Labour that it was on the right side, the Palestinian side, of this conflict before they got their vote. So now Labour, with Lammy's help, is proving that it is. And he's rammed home the message that this government is sympathetic to terrorists. I'm wondering now what makes David Lammy's views, maybe even Starmer's, any different from those of terrorist supporter Jeremy Corbyn? And how does this all look to the outside world, especially to America, which is mightily angry with us because there are some in the Biden administration who also want to curb arms sales to Israel and who side with Hamas? But God help Lammy if Trump gets into the White House. Let's not forget he called Trump a Nazi sociopath, yet another sign of his immaturity and total unsuitability for high office, and Trump has already said he doesn't want to work with him. Which means he won't. And where does that leave Britain? Alienated and alone, that's where. How many more countries will Lammy upset by making decisions based on his views and pretending they're the views of the British people? And from a practical point of view, we buy way more weapons from Israel than they buy from us. So how safe does that keep us if Israel tells us to sod off? Our allies are currently buying Israeli weapons systems that will protect them from Russia. And Lammy is messing with that and exposing Britain to potential danger? In opposition he's been used to opening his great big, irresponsible mouth and there being few repercussions. This is different. This is grown-up politics and our country's security is at stake. This little island, which has been the victim of Islamic terror on too many occasions, needs its allies. And Lammy just spat in the faces of two of our biggest ones. But surely the bottom line here has to be that the murderous death cult Hamas cannot be allowed to win? If Lammy doesn't see that, Starmer needs to get rid. For all our sakes. And not to put too fine a point on it, for the sake of the rest of the world,